increase in basic exemption limits, revival of standard deduction, enhancement of ATC limits, higher reimbursement for medical and travel expenses, deletion of the concept of notional income on property, and higher tax exemption limit on interest payment for home buyers. Now, you only wish it was the finance minister and not me reading all of this out. Every year before the budget, there's a long wish list of personal finance changes that all of us expect. But more often than not, it remains just that, a wish list. Hello and welcome to BloombergQuint. Today on this pre-budget special, I have with me Karthik Javeri, a certified financial planner, and Ishita Sen Gupta of PwC India to discuss the top 5 doable personal finance changes in this budget. The idea really is to look at the top 5 doable changes, and let me come to one and which essentially fit into the government's larger policy, right? Karthik, let me start with you. The latest figures reveal that the direct tax collections, which includes both income tax, corporate tax, and your wealth tax, are up by 12%. So, is it not optimistic for us to hope that, there are going to be any tinkering with the basic exemption limits?
It's quite a natural and obvious thing to expect because the government has got almost a sort of a tax bonanza collection this year. So you would expect them to reward all taxpayers by expanding the tax slabs. But that's not necessarily why it would happen. So let's understand, let's go back in this year and let's see why the increase in tax collection happened. So there were two major events that happened. One was the voluntary disclosure scheme which ended on 30th of September last year. And the other thing that happened was demonetization. So because of this, a lot of people voluntarily came forward, put money, declared money, as a result of which paid taxes. So yes, the tax collection has been quite stupendous in the sense it's a big jump from the yearly estimates and the incremental estimates that we expect. But just because that has happened, should their tax slabs be expanded? Not necessarily. Maybe we'll see it some sort of inflationary adjustment, if you like. So that is possible because when you expand tax brackets, the government is going to lose some amount of revenue. Where are you going to compensate that loss of revenue from? So are you going to expand the tax base in some mechanism? Are you going to bring more people into the tax fold so that by even giving an expansion and having additional collection, you are still okay or better off than your previous situation?
Ishita, let me come to you. I'm reading this out from the 2016 economic survey, which pointed out that only 5.5% of earning individuals are under the tax net, and that India's tax to GDP ratio is 16.6%, which is much lower than the emerging market economy average of about 21% and the OECD average of 34%. What can the government do to increase the tax base really?
See, the government has already started from one end. So it has tried to bring in more people through the income disclosure scheme. It has tried to make sure that the feeling goes that non-compliance is not the way to go. I think now that the government has got a huge public support during the demonetization phase, I think the public has been enormously patient and has borne with a lot of practical challenges. They are waiting for a feel-good factor to come in. Okay. And I think the ground is fertile because you've got an added tax collection. Right. And therefore, this is the time possibly where the government has the leeway to tinker around a bit and give a very positive reinforcement to the compliance scenario. So if you look at, while you mentioned about the other countries, definitely India has a very low tax-paying population. Even the Prime Minister in one of his speeches said that only 24 lakh people apparently are in the 30% bracket. Now, one way to do it is that you increase the slabs. So you keep people within the tax fold. They don't necessarily drop out, but you give a positive factor that it is not because we reach the 30% very quickly. Right. 10 lakhs is hardly anything for us to be paying a 30% tax. And if you look at most economies, the threshold is much higher for the higher rates. Therefore, for that kind of a thing, if you can, tinker with the tax slabs a bit, it gives more purchasing power to the people as well, plus probably gets them to come and pay more taxes.
Okay, so you're saying that don't make 2.5 3, but maybe make 2.5 to 7 and bring it under 10% maybe.
It will be a play, that is an option I'm saying. Okay. Because at the end of the day, the finance minister will have to make a play of where more revenue is lost. Right. Or where he can expect more revenue to come in. So one is that the easiest thing is to tinker with the base exemption, hike it up a bit. And every time they have, it's not been enormous. It's been a marginal hike. So he could do that and possibly that's the easy way out. The other is to expand the slabs a bit, but that will depend on how much of revenue loss it's going to be and whether it can be offset by a greater number of people who are going to pay taxes.
All right, okay. The second point I want to sort of talk about is that they don't want people to use a lot of cash. One way which, they can do it is to tax certain cash withdrawals. They put a threshold and then they, impose some sort of a tax on those withdrawals. Karthik, do you foresee anything of the sort?
It's like a wishful sort of a thinking that, every time you withdraw something or every time you do some sort of transaction, it's a completely different school of thought. You can have it. It's not that you can't have a banking transaction tax or a withdrawal tax or whatever, whichever form it comes in. But then the entire tax structure needs to be had a relook. You cannot have your existing structure as well as this structure. See, because in some sense, on one hand, you're paying, say, approximately 30% tax. And, in India, as a country, we've always been in a situation where let's try and extract the maximum out of the taxpayers instead of trying and expanding the tax base, which it's always been the case. So what happens is, firstly, you're paying 30% tax, then you're paying indirect taxes, then you start paying the STTs, and depending on, you start paying property tax and all of those things. So when you start taking an aggregate, you'll end up seeing that you're almost touching 38, 39, maybe 40 or little more than that sometimes. That much percentage of your revenue is going away as taxes. So if you're going to bring in a banking transaction tax, then something else needs to go down dramatically. It cannot, be happening together. A securities transactions tax is slightly tangential, but that came in because long-term capital gains was being discounted completely, and you were going to have complete relief on long-term capital gain tax on sale of equity transactions, and that's why you had STT, because every transaction attracted a little bit of tax, and a sum total of everything was much more than what they actually lost out. So if you do banking transaction tax, it has to be a very well thought out strategy. I do not think it's going to come in a hurry. It may come in some form. It may come in to disincentivize people to do too much of cash withdrawals, because the government does not want you to withdraw cash. Yeah. That's very, very clear. But at the same time, you cannot completely shortchange the whole economy. It's going to take some time before people change their behaviors.
Fair enough. So banking transaction tax is slightly different from, you taxing just the cash withdrawal.
Exactly.
Because banking transaction tax may not even ensure that those people who are quote unquote doing black money transactions will get impacted by it. Yeah. So it sort of defeats the purpose, because you're again ending up taxing the honest taxpayer, right?
Exactly.
Okay, Ishita, you sound a little more optimistic today, so I'm going to come to you with this. That do you think that while the government might take steps to disincentivize cash withdrawals, at the same time, people who are moving towards more digital transactions, is there a way to incentivize them?
Prime Minister has already made some opening remarks in this. So he, in one of his Man Ki Baat addresses, he actually talked about this Lucky Grahak Yojana and a Digi Dhan Vyapar. So he's basically targeting both the customer and the trader to encourage them to use digital means of payments. That I think is a good thing, because India, to look at the demographics, India has a large population of young people who basically would not be scared of using digital means. So they need some push or a prop to do it. And I think this way it is good for them, because if they are getting some points on their cards or whatever, then it's a feel good factor for them.
Rewards.
Right, it's a reward for them. What you need to tap are the rural areas, who are the population who are really scared of this whole it's a mindset issue. So it's not people like you or me who are anyway using cards for a lot of payments or net banking for a lot of transactions that we do. We are talking about people in the rural areas, people who are middle class housewives who are scared of using cards and they prefer cash. So when you're talking of converting them, it's going to take some time. And to put a blanket ban on withdrawals, etc., I think right now it is not the right time, because the country has gone through one disruption.
So how do we incentivize
in one of his addresses, he actually spoke of some state governments who took some initiatives.
Right.
So Assam was one example that he quoted. And he said that they have rolled out monetary rewards for farmers who are using digital means to buy seeds and other things. They have also, gram panchayats have been rolled in. So if village panchayats are paying the statutory dues through digital means, then they are going to get some rebate or relief. Similarly, if they can introduce some sort of tax subs for smaller businesses who use maybe 90% of their transactions through digital means. Maybe those are things that could reinforce this, because right now I think since we have already experimented, the public has been sort of forced to experiment, it is probably the right time to push it forward, propel it by giving some SOPs.
So you've used the stick, now use the carrot.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The third change that I want to talk about is standard deduction proposition. Some figures suggest that, countries like Indonesia, Germany, France, they all have allowance in the form of standard deduction for salaried people, because there are expenses that as salaried people you incur on account of your work. While the business class gets the benefit of it, it's a salaried class which doesn't. Is it possible that the government can introduce standard deduction, Karthik, in its very purest form, or there is an itemized deduction option?
If I was the finance minister, I would really like an itemized deduction, because though that makes life a little bit complicated, but it gives the reward where it is required. So for example, if you want to boost the housing and infrastructure sector, you are giving a standard deduction on the rentals that we earn from buying a property, giving it out on lease, and when you buy a housing project or into a housing project, you're giving employment to so many thousands of people in some indirect sense. So if the standard deduction had to kind of make a comeback of sorts, then I would prefer it to come in an itemized fashion and not in a blanket fashion, because not everybody requires it, or not everybody is going to be able to make the best use of it. If you are doing something, then here's an incentive.
Okay, Ishita, what is your view on standard deduction versus itemized deduction?
So I am focusing on the salaried individual, because it's been a long time angst of the salaried population that we are sitting ducks whenever the government wants to raise. So we are the ones who are voluntarily paying tax.
The lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, we are the lowest hanging fruit, and therefore we are always caught in the net. So somewhere I think to bring a little parity with people who are able to take a lot of other deductions on account of their business expenses, etc. So if I'm going to compare the standard deduction, I'm comparing it to basically all the itemized allowances and deductions that you get under a salary structure.
Right, which is your food coupons, which is your travel.
Food coupons you will have, and honestly there's a whole bunch of them apart from those which are like your child education allowance, hostel allowance, transport allowance. And if you look at those limits, I mean, they have absolutely no sense of reality with today's cost of living. 100 rupees per month child education allowance is nothing.
It's nothing. Right.
So somewhere, on the other hand, the only way you can claim those deductions is by giving bills. Employers have to check through those bills to get declarations and go through the whole thing,
which is an administration nightmare in itself.
Yeah. So if you are looking at also encouraging people to give employment, you have to make compliances easy for the employer.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not going to generate. People are generally scared of going through this whole, pain of compliance for their employees. So somewhere in that sense, standard deduction would definitely make it easy. Having said that, if you look at our history, because this is not a new topic, it's been going on for years, and
I think
committee after committee has been talking about this.
And I think we did away with this in 2006.
Chalia committee had first brought it in, and that time they had actually recommended that the standard deduction should be 33 1/3% of the salary. Okay, without any cap.
Correct.
But what eventually happened was that the limits were capped at 30,000 for people who had salary up to 5 lakhs and 20,000 beyond. Now that is nothing. So if you've got to give that,
so the suggestion was it should be 33% of your salary, and it came to be about 30,000.
It was capped at 30,000 or 20,000 for people who earned more.
All right.
In fact, the committee report that time had said that it should be commensurate with the salary levels. Therefore, you just peg it as a percentage of salary.
Right.
Because the underlying assumption was that people spend more for earning more.
Right.
So broadly. Right. So, but then if you are 20,000, then it becomes more an administrative burden, because it's neither here nor there, which is why it was removed. It was taken away. So from that perspective, it will work if you are going to give a reasonable cap, not something just for the sake of giving it.
Okay. The fourth change that I want to talk about is, TDS thresholds, your tax deducted at source thresholds, and the tax rates. The Ishwar committee has said that nearly 65% of the personal income tax collection in India was through direct tax at source, and TDS provisions need to be made more tax friendly, and not as tedious as they have remained over the years. Do you anticipate, Karthik, changes in TDS thresholds and tax rates?
TDS norms currently, let's say for an individual, says that if you're making a payment of more than 30,000 rupees to a person and aggregated if you're crossing 75,000 to any person, then you need to deduct some tax at source. So to that extent, how much will you change it to? So are you saying that, for example, you increase it, it's not going to help you? The whole idea is that the system that we have now, and with the reconciliation system that you can see on the income tax website itself, it's an extremely powerful mechanism. In fact, today you can find out if the person who has deducted your tax, whether he has made the tax payment or not, and whether he has filed his return or not. And if he has not done that, you're almost empowered to go back and ask them that why haven't you sort of filed your returns so far, and as a result of which I'm not getting this credit. So I think that is brilliant. In fact, a lot of income that the government is collecting, right, as you rightly pointed out, almost 60-65% is happening through TDSs. So it's a fantastic mechanism. It gets caught automatically. You start uploading your return and you will be entitled for a refund in many instances of individual taxation. So I think that is absolutely brilliant. If at all they want to get more people into the compliance, maybe they could revise it downwards.
The rates, if you look at different categories, because a whole bunch of different categories of TDS to be made. So the rate changes from literally a 1% to a 20%. Maybe somewhere if you have a little bit of uniformity of rates, it becomes easier, because you also have to classify it in under different sections and do it. Number two, what the Ishwar committee also, so Ishwar committee somewhere had, I think, recommended 5% for individuals.
Right.
And they also, one important thing that they suggested is that for for non-residents, do not, have them go through the whole rigmarole of getting a PAN, and if they have a tax identification number, then use that for this purpose. That I think is a very good suggestion, because for the PAN process is messy and long, particularly for foreigners to be doing that, and you have a whole lot of specifications in which forms need to be filled and submitted and signed and so on. So if you can do away with the PAN for foreigners, then that's a good thing for that.
So it's a process change.
It's a process change, and I think I agree with Karthik. Now the traces system has become much more efficient and better and visible. So you are able to actually track the payments. So from that perspective, if you are able to, what is the pain factor? The pain factor is the different stages in the whole compliance process. So you will have registrations, then you will have payments, then you will have returns to be filed, then you will have mismatches somewhere in your challans and your returns, and then you keep going and getting reminders and notices, and you keep submitting. Then you will also, if you have by mistake given more, deposited more tax, and I'm talking of employers here, then getting that refund becomes a huge issue
For the employers.
Yeah, because for the employees, then if you are able to make those simple, if the employer is able to claim back the refund, and you just need a sign off from the employee that his employer can, then the whole process becomes easier, because otherwise the more stakeholders you're involving in the whole process, the more complex it becomes.
Because as of today, if I understand, my employer has deducted more TDS from me.
I will have to claim it back.
Yeah, so I have to claim it back. It's not my employer who's doing it, right?
No. So you have to claim it back.
Yeah.
So if you forget or something happens, you're not in a position to do it, then you've lost it.
Correct.
And I deal a lot with expatriates.
Right.
For them, it's a major issue, because when they come into India, they work. Typically, refunds take some time to be processed.
Indeed.
In most developed countries, employers have a right to take back the refund, so long as they're giving undertaking, etc., that they will pay it back to the employee. And if the employee and employer have agreed, I don't see why the government should play a role in it.
Okay.
So these kind of pain factors, if you reduce, then it gives it will actually help the whole process.
Okay, great. All right, the fifth change that Karthik you expect personally is, we've dealt with it briefly earlier in the conversation, which is modifications in deductions and exemptions. Are the limits that, some of the limits that Ishita spoke about bothering you in terms of deductions that we currently get?
Not only that, in fact, I think it's a brilliant time, because demonetization happened and this is the time to actually create enormous amount of goodwill. So go back and completely revamp your deduction package, so to say. I mean, make it a package of sorts. So we've got a little bit, but let's enhance all of them, because instead of straight away saying that, look, I'm going to expand your tax slabs and I'm going to give you a relief there, that's one way of doing it. The other more beneficial way, or a more credible way, I would think, is revamping this entire ATC. So for example, for your long-term investments, the ATC can remain the way it is. right? And you can maybe keep it at 1,50,000, you can even increase it to 2 lakhs, there's no problem, because all that money is coming into the government coffers, and it's coming in and it's staying for a long time. Now, as a percentage of people, the number of people who are doing an ELSS, which is typically money which is in your control, versus the 90 or 95% people who are putting money in life insurance policies and PPF and NSCs and things like that. That money is a very, very long-term sort of a money. The government has that money for a long time. They can use that money for all the activities that they want: infrastructure, job creation, employment, subsidies, so on and so forth. So keep that limit as it is or increase it.
At one point, the long-term infrastructure bonds were also part of ATC,
That's right.
which I don't think happened.
Which was just 20,000. So here is a fabulous time to actually collect a lot of money. So then you can actually make a new section purely the way we used to have the 80CCC, which is now merged under ATC, but have a separate section for long-term pensions. Because again, the tone of the budget in the last 2-3 instances was that we want to make India a pensionable society, and most people have very little pension, except it's unless it's the private sector or the government sector. Most of the people, the large majority of the Indian population, does not really have access to good pension and pension that continues for till perpetuity in some sense. So you increase the limit and you create a separate section, maybe give a complete 2 lakh contribution there. And the third very important area is social security. We just don't have anything like a social security or a national insurance or anything of that sort. So now, a lot of insurance policies that we buy, for example, they always have an element where you are supposed to pay a certain amount of payment yourself. And the more senior you become, then there is always a copay factor that comes in. So that copay factor could be then subsidized through contributions made to some medical insurance programs, which the government could have. So here, again, we have an 80D section for that, which has its limits of 25,000 and 30,000 and things like that. But you enhance that greatly to about 1 lakh, 2 lakh. You can buy health funds. We don't have anything like a health fund right now, which serves like a contingency fund along with a health insurance that you might be wanting to buy from some insurance company. So when you make specific contributions here, when you buy critical illness policies, that way what happens is you're actually also promoting the people to go ahead, buy the adequate amount of insurance, don't buy under insurance or don't stay under insured, so on and so forth. So you do all these benefits to people and they have the right amount of covers and they can have the enhanced level of covers. And for the ones who have a higher salary, if you make more larger contribution there, you also save a great amount on taxes.
Right.
And that way the importance of these areas also gets more than highlighted. Contributions are made, governments can use that contribution and benefits.
And I don't go home with the feeling that I'm paying taxes and not getting anything out
of return. So deductions, to my mind, is a great way of encouraging people to save for themselves, and it's a win-win situation for the government as well as the consumer.
For the salary section, for instance, if I were to come back to that, so for instance, I think some definitely need. And I would like to tie it up with what the government or what the economy needs now. You need a boost in the job creation. I think that is one big area of concern right now.
Sure.
So housing is one area which can achieve both. So if you are going to encourage, and the Pradhan Mantri also had this housing for all agenda,
affordable housing, yes.
Affordable housing. Now they brought in a separate deduction last year for first time home buyers. Where it is capped at, so the value of the house is capped at 50 lakhs and the loan amount at 35 lakhs. Now in a place like the metros, I think they need to do something about these limits.
Right.
So if they enhance the limits, then that actually brings fresh people into the sector.
Indeed.
Because you're talking about your first time home buyers. So that would give a nice boost. So that definitely they could tweak. Apart from that, for existing, because the other thing you want to do is increase consumption,
right.
Therefore give more purchasing power to people, and from that loan repayments. Right now ATC clubs in a whole bunch of very disparate things.
Right.
So I like Karthik's idea of having different a separate deduction for categories of items.
Absolutely.
And therefore if you're going to bunch up loan repayment as part of that, then it really loses its significance.
Right.
So you could have a separate one for loan repayments that could possibly help people. Coming to the nitty-gritty deductions, one area we could look at certainly is your LTA.
Okay, sure.
Indians are great travelers.
Right.
We as a people love to travel, and I think if you are going to give a boost to our tourism industry, then why do you have to stick to this 4 years calendar? It doesn't. It's just too much compliance for little benefit. So therefore, you should have it every year.
Okay, all right. So we've covered the 5 changes that Karthik and Ishita here think that are doable in this budget. Karthik, Ishita, quick wrap-up comments. Do you expect the tone of this budget would make people like you and me a little happier?
The government still has a lot of money that they are holding on to purely from demonetization. So they have actually made a superb collection of all the old currency that has come back in. They have all the reasons to go back and give a reward to everybody, not only for the sufferings or for the inconvenience that people have had, but because it's been almost like a reset of the whole economy. So there is ample scope to start a lot of measures, a lot of endeavors which are going to benefit people for many decades to come. So I think it's a great time to start a lot of positive things, a lot of new initiatives could be taken up at this time.
Will we have much to talk about on budget day, Ishita?
I hope so. I hope so. The ground is fertile.
Okay.
And I think this is a time as good as any for the FM to be a little more bold than earlier to give something back to the public. So I certainly hope so.
All right, here's hoping to smiles on the faces of service class people and individuals who are hoping a lot of good that the budget 2017 can do to their finances. We'll get you all the details and the fine print on budget day. Stay tuned to BloombergQuint. Thank you for watching.